Welcome into College Football Breakdown with Joe Lisi. Find him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. He went 3-1 last week. Picked that Iowa State game ATS, which was a great pick, Joe. Also 14-10 year to date. So let's bring him right in. Joe, how you doing this week, man?
Looking forward to another great weekend of college football. Week number 7, we start to separate the contenders from the pretenders. Should be another great weekend of college football ahead of us, Drew.
Yeah, good stuff, Joe. We got a ACC matchup, 12 noon Eastern time, Saturday. Boston College going on the road to play Louisville. Looks like Louisville is dropping -22 pretty much across the board, 56.5 the total. We got a 55.5 at Heritage, -21.5. If you're looking to bet on Louisville, you can find it that low at Chris. Joe, how are you looking to bet this ACC matchup?
Yeah, I actually like Boston College here. It is homecoming for Louisville. They're coming off a disappointing road loss in Raleigh, 39-25 to NC State. They now come back home to a team that they dominated last year, 52-7. You look at Boston College, they played very well defensively against Virginia Tech last week. They recorded 5 sacks, held the Hokies to only 109 rushing yards on the ground. I think this is a team in Boston College that's playing better over recent weeks and can keep this game within the number. You look at the defensive performance by Boston College. Entering this ball game, they're holding opposing offenses to 182 passing yards per game against some of the better teams on their schedule, like Notre Dame. They held them to 96 passing yards. Against Clemson, it was 140 passing yards. And then the last couple of weeks against Central Michigan and Virginia Tech, that front seven is much better. They only gave up 116 rushing yards to Central Michigan, only 109 to Virginia Tech. More importantly, offensively as well, they pounded the rock for 153 rushing yards between the tackles. Against Central Michigan, it was 224. I think Boston College gets into a low-scoring game, and I'm not sold on the mindset of Louisville. They have Florida State on deck. They're now out of the ACC title hunt for the most part, and more importantly, out of the college football playoff. Where is this team emotionally? I like Boston College to cover this number this coming weekend.
All right, so Joe on Boston College plus 22 points. Can get that pretty much across the board on SBR odds right now. Moving on to the 3:30 Eastern time slot, we got a good one here. Georgia Tech and Miami. Looks like Miami is laying 5.5 pretty much across the board. If you're looking to bet Georgia Tech, you can find a 6 at Intertops right now. Joe, how are you looking to bet this other ACC matchup?
Yeah, at the start of the year, I picked Georgia Tech to win the coastal side of the ACC. I'm not backing down now. They have an extra week of preparation. Miami's coming off an emotional 24-20 victory over Florida State, scored in the last 2 minutes of that ball game, last seconds of that ball game. But this is a Georgia Tech offense that's averaging 396 rushing yards on the ground. You look at Miami last week against Florida State. They allowed 203 rushing yards in that matchup. Entering that ball game, Florida State was only rushing the football for 90 rushing yards on the ground. So that was a dominating effort by the Seminoles. More importantly, look at Georgia Tech's defense. They're holding opposing offenses to only 259 total yards per game, 101 rushing yards per game, and 158 passing yards per game. They're holding opposing offenses to 23% of third down conversions. And when you look at their offense is converting 53% of the time. I think they could get Miami into a low-scoring game, and I'm calling for the upset. Georgia Tech 21, Miami 17.
Yeah, I like this one. This is a great rivalry in my book also. And also, Joe, you got to think, Miami coming off of that big win against Florida State, where's their heads at? And preparing for this triple option, it could be tough. It's all about assignment defensive football. So you think that could have something to do with Georgia Tech pulling off the upset?
Oh, without a doubt. Now, when you look at this matchup overall, Miami has dominated the series since 2012. They're 4-1 over Georgia Tech by 10.5 points per game. And over the last 2 victories, they've won those games by 15.5 points per game. But if Miami gets over aggressive and runs sideline to sideline, that could open up backdoor backdoor reads for Georgia Tech's triple option, especially the dive play that they've had great success on. So Miami can't be overly aggressive. They have to maintain gap integrity in this matchup. And if Georgia Tech puts together an 8 or a 9-minute drive to start the game, I think they'll be in this game from start to finish. When you look at that game against Georgia Tech last year, Miami dominated that matchup, but Justin Thomas did have 2 critical fumbles in that ball game deep inside their own 30-yard line that allowed Miami to score off of turnovers. So that was a key characteristic in last year's victory in Bobby Dodd Stadium by the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. So Joe liking the Jackets in Miami. Another 3:30 matchup going to the SEC this time. A battle of Tigers in the Bayou. We got 207 Auburn versus 208 LSU. Looks like Penny's hanging a -6.5, -7 everywhere else. 44.5 the total. How you looking to bet Auburn versus LSU, Joe?
Yeah, from a series standpoint, I like LSU in this matchup. They've won 3 of the last 5 over Auburn by 13.3 points per game. The last victory by the Auburn Tigers in Baton Rouge came in 1999, so you have that factor heading into this ballgame. Last year, Auburn did get the victory 18-13 in dramatic fashion. LSU did score with no time remaining on the clock, but the touchdown was waved off. It led to Les Miles' firing for that ballgame. You look at Auburn as a whole overall, coming off a convincing 44-23 victory over Ole Miss. Jarrett Stidham now goes on the road for his first SEC road game. You look at Auburn's victories this year, Drew, against Georgia Southern, Missouri, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Those teams are a combined 10-13 overall. I look at LSU's offense that pounded the rock for 216 rushing yards last week against Florida. And defensively, I think the Tigers played much better last week on the road in the Swamp. They're holding opposing offenses to 137 rushing yards per game and only 171 passing yards through the air. I think they step up at home. It's a 3:30 start, but I still like LSU in this ballgame. Coupled with the fact that Danny Etling is a senior quarterback, I think he has big game experience. Jarrett Stidham on the road. I'm just not sold on Auburn overall. I'm calling for the upset. LSU 28, Auburn 24 this coming Saturday.
All right, Joe liking the upset, so he'll take LSU +7 at home. And you bring up some good points, Joe. I mean, Auburn not winning since 1999 in LSU, even the year that they went to the national championship game with Nick Marshall as the quarterback. This was the regular season game that they dropped. So good points there, Joe. Moving on to the night slate. We got a 7 o'clock kick Eastern time, 2:03, 2:04, staying in the SEC. Texas A&M, the Aggies, traveling to Gainesville, Florida to take on the Florida Gators. This line surprised me, Joe. Florida -2.5 at Chris right now. Across the board, 51.5 the total. How are you looking to bet this night game in the SEC?
Yeah, I really like this matchup. I really like Florida here. I think they're playing well. When you look at the rushing offense over the last 4 SEC games, Florida's starting to run the football. It started 4 games ago against Tennessee. They rushed for 168 yards on the ground. They followed that up in the victory in Lexington with 186 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. At home against Vanderbilt, they pounded the rock for 218 on the ground. And last week against the solid LSU defense, they rushed for 194 rushing yards on the ground in that loss, 17-16. They now face a Texas A&M defense that gave up 232 rushing yards last week in the loss to Alabama. Texas A&M now goes on the road with a very young, inexperienced quarterback in Kellen Mond. He's completing 54% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But this is a Texas A&M offense in back-to-back games now against South Carolina and Alabama. Third down conversions are a concern. They've only converted 10 of 30 third down conversions. They're going up against the Gators defense that held the last 2 opponents now, Danny Etling and Kyle Shermer, to 48% completion percentage. I like the way Florida's running the football. I think Texas A&M could be worn out in this ballgame, and I think this is a convincing Florida victory. They'll be wearing camouflage uniforms for this battle. I think they're the more complete team. The secondary going up against a very inexperienced quarterback is the difference. Florida 37, Texas A&M 20.
All right, so you bring up the crazy uniforms they'll be wearing. Those are kind of ridiculous, but nonetheless, Joe Lisi on 3 dogs and 1 short home favorite. So Joe, anything else college football betting wise that you want to get out there before we close this out?
No, I mean, those are the 4 games that I really key on right now. I'll throw one more dog out there that I think could be a lot closer than people think. I think it's Nebraska and Ohio State. I think Nebraska plus the 24 points will be in striking distance against Urban Meyer and the crew this coming Saturday.
All right, so is that just an extra freebie, or are we putting this on the official record?
You could put it on the record. You could throw Nebraska in there, make it a 5-teamer. I like Nebraska plus the 24 this coming Saturday.
All right, so Joe on 4 underdogs and 1 short home favorite. Look for him on Twitter at GoForThe2, his work at GoForThe2.com. I'm Drew Martin. We'll be back next Thursday with another college football breakdown with Joe Lisi. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.